In the lands of Istran, where blood determines hierarchy, magic sets the price, and a kiss can break an oath. Three great races have ruled for millennia. The elves, bearers of ancient spells among whom are born omegas with the ability to influence magical rituals. The werewolves, clan warriors who preserve the old ways and loyalty to the pack. And the demons, masters of magical debt, servants of underground deals, masters of contracts and manipulations. In this world, an omega is not weak but sacrificial, a vessel of magic and simultaneously its engine. They are the conduits through which the greatest magical workings flow, their bodies and souls capable of channeling forces that would destroy others. But this power comes at a cost, for omegas are forever bound by the magical contracts that define their existence. My name is Ezereth of the Silver Hill House, an elven mage and omega who became a debtor to a demon after a failed awakening ritual that saved my people but left a blood seal mark upon my skin. The contract was simple in its brutality. I must win the Great Clan Games, a magical competition where each race puts forward their champion. My reward for victory would be freedom. My penalty for failure would be the loss of my soul to the demonic realm forever. The games are held once every generation, when the three moons of Istran align and the magical barriers between realms grow thin. Champions from each race compete in trials of magic, combat, and cunning, with the winner claiming not only personal glory but the right to set the terms of interracial relations for the next 25 years. For an omega to compete is almost unheard of, but my circumstances left me no choice. My mentor in this endeavor was Cade, a demon with silver eyes, cold irony, and a strange tendency toward silence. Unlike other demons who reveled in chaos and corruption, Cade seemed almost melancholic, as if the weight of centuries had worn down his enthusiasm for the traditional demonic pursuits. He was ancient even by demon standards, having overseen contracts since the founding of the games themselves. When I first met Cade, I expected the typical demonic arrogance and sadism. Instead, I found a being who seemed genuinely interested in my success, though whether this was because he had something to gain from my victory or because he possessed some vestige of what humans might call compassion, I could not tell. He taught me combat techniques that blended elven magic with demonic cunning, showed me how to read the emotional states of my opponents, and prepared me for the psychological warfare that was as much a part of the games as any physical contest. But there was something about Cade that troubled me, a sadness in his silver eyes that spoke of losses I could not comprehend. Sometimes I would catch him staring at nothing, his expression distant and pained, as if he were remembering something he wished he could forget. When I asked him about it, he would simply say that demons, like all immortal beings, carried the weight of their choices across centuries, and that some burdens grew heavier rather than lighter with time. My preparation for the games was complicated by the presence of Kieran of the Northern Pack, a half-wolf warrior who had been my training partner for years. I had saved his life once, protecting him from hunters who would have killed him for his mixed heritage, and it was through my intervention that he had been accepted into the Guild of the Scar, the elite warrior society that trained champions for the games. Kieran was not an alpha, despite his impressive physical prowess and natural leadership abilities. Instead, he bore what the wolves called the mark of the predator, a rare gift that allowed him to hear blood, red pain, and control fury. These abilities made him a formidable opponent, but they also marked him as different from other wolves, forever caught between the pure-blood alphas who led the packs and the betas who served them. Our training sessions had always been intense, but as the games approached, I began to notice a change in Kieran. There was a tension in him that went beyond normal pre-competition nerves, a guardedness that suggested he was keeping secrets. When I tried to probe deeper, using my omega empathy to sense his emotional state, I found his feelings carefully shielded, as if he had been trained to resist exactly the kind of magical investigation I was attempting. The truth came out during a particularly brutal sparring session, when Kieran's control slipped and I caught a glimpse of his true emotional state. He was torn between loyalty and duty, between old friendships and new obligations. Someone had gotten to him, had made him an offer he felt he could not refuse. My heart sank as I realized what this meant. Kieran would be my opponent in the games, and our years of partnership and friendship would count for nothing once we entered the arena. That night, I confronted him directly. Who made you the offer? I asked, finding him alone in the moonlit training yard where we had spent so many hours perfecting our techniques. He didn't try to deny it. The Northern Pack, he said quietly. They promised me freedom from my mixed heritage, full acceptance as a pack member, and a mate of my choosing if I could ensure your defeat in the games. And you agreed? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I didn't have a choice, he said, his voice filled with pain. You don't understand what it's like to live between worlds, never fully accepted by either side. This is my chance to finally belong somewhere. You belong here, I told him. With me, with the guild. We're your family. The guild tolerates me, he replied. The pack is offering me a real place, a real future. I can't pass that up, not even for you. His words cut deeper than any blade. I had thought our bond was stronger than political maneuvering and racial loyalty, but I had been naive. In the world of Eastern, personal relationships were always secondary to the larger forces of power and survival. The games began 3 days later, under the light of the aligned moons. Representatives from all 3 races gathered in the ancient amphitheater that had been carved from living stone by the first demon lords. The air crackled with magical energy and political tension as champions prepared for contests that would determine the fate of nations. The first trial was one of magical prowess, where competitors had to demonstrate their ability to channel and control elemental forces. I had trained for this extensively with Cade, learning to combine my natural elven affinity for nature magic with more aggressive demonic techniques. But as I stepped into the arena and saw Kieran among my opponents, my concentration wavered. The battle began with a display of power that lit up the night sky. Elven competitors wove intricate spells that called down starlight and summoned forest spirits. Demon champions opened rifts in reality itself, drawing power from the spaces between worlds. And the wolf representatives, including Kieran, channeled primal forces that spoke to the savage heart of nature itself. I started strong, my magic flowing cleanly and powerfully as I built a complex working that combined multiple elemental forces. But then Kieran moved closer, ostensibly to position himself for his own magical display, and everything changed. In the middle of my most delicate spell work, as I balanced forces that could have leveled mountains if they went wrong, Kieran stepped forward and kissed me. It was not gentle or romantic. It was aggressive, possessive, meant to humiliate me in front of the assembled crowd and destroy my concentration at the crucial moment. The kiss shattered my focus, and my spell collapsed in a spectacular failure that sent magical feedback racing through the arena. But something else happened, something that neither Kieran nor I had anticipated. The blood seal on my skin, the mark of my demonic contract, reacted to the intimate contact. Ancient magic recognized the kiss not as an assault but as a consent to bonding, and suddenly our magical essences were intertwined in ways that neither of us understood. The crowd assumed that my defeat was due to the shock and humiliation of Kieran's unexpected action. They saw a weak Omega undone by aggressive tactics, exactly what they expected. But I knew the truth was far more complex and dangerous. The magical connection that had formed between us was not something that could be easily broken, and I could feel my power flowing toward him in ways that left me drained and vulnerable. After the trial, as competitors retired to prepare for the next challenge, I found myself unable to use magic without feeling an overwhelming need for Kieran's presence. It was as if part of my magical core had been grafted onto his, creating a dependency that went far beyond normal Omega-Alpha bonding. I was no longer magically autonomous. I was bound to him in ways that terrified me. Cade found me in my quarters that evening, struggling to perform even simple magical exercises without the destabilizing influence of the incomplete bond. He took one look at my condition and cursed in the ancient demonic tongue, his usual composure cracking for the first time since I had known him. "You've created a magical node," he said grimly. "It's a phenomenon that occurs perhaps once in a millennium, when 2 powerful magical beings make unconscious contact during a period of heightened emotional stress. Your essences have become interlinked in ways that neither of you can control. Can it be broken?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. "Not without killing one or both of you," he replied. "The connection goes deeper than surface magic. It's written into the fundamental structure of your magical signatures. You're bound to him now, whether you want to be or not. Then I've lost, I said despairingly. I can't compete effectively if I'm dependent on my opponent for magical stability. Not necessarily, Kate said thoughtfully. The bond works both ways. He's as dependent on you as you are on him, though he may not realize it yet. His magical abilities will be enhanced by the connection, but they'll also be unstable without your presence to ground them. What are you suggesting? That you use the bond instead of fighting it, he said. Turn it into a weapon rather than a weakness. If you can't break the connection, then control it. Over the following days, as the games continued with trials of physical combat and strategic thinking, I began to experiment with the magical link between Kieran and myself. I discovered that I could indeed influence his magical state, enhancing or disrupting his abilities depending on my focus and intent. But the process was exhausting, and I found myself growing increasingly drawn to him despite my anger at his betrayal. The connection was not just magical. It was emotional and physical as well. I could feel his moods, his fears, his desires as if they were my own. And worst of all, I could sense that his feelings about our situation were as conflicted as mine. He had accepted the pack's offer because he felt he had no choice, but the bond was making him question everything he thought he knew about loyalty and belonging. Meanwhile, Cade's behavior began to change in ways that puzzled me. He had always been professional in his mentoring, maintaining the distance appropriate to our demon-debtor relationship. But now I noticed him watching Kieran with an intensity that went beyond mere strategic interest. There was something in his silver eyes when he looked at the young wolf, something that spoke of recognition and longing. The truth emerged during a private conversation I overheard between them. Cade had approached Kieran ostensibly to discuss the magical bond and its implications, but their discussion quickly moved into more personal territory. You remind me of someone I knew long ago, Cade told him, his usual composure replaced by something more vulnerable. Another warrior caught between worlds, trying to find a place where he belonged. What happened to him? Kieran asked, and I could hear genuine curiosity in his voice rather than the guarded hostility he usually showed toward demons. He made choices based on fear rather than hope, Cade replied. He chose the safety of conformity over the risk of authenticity, and it destroyed him slowly, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of the person I had cared about. Is that why you're helping Ezereth? Kieran asked. Because you see parallels to this other warrior? I'm helping Ezereth because he deserves freedom, Cade said. But I'm talking to you because I see potential for a different kind of ending to a similar story. There was a long pause, and then Kieran said quietly, The pack's offer isn't what I thought it would be. They don't want me to join them as an equal. They want me to be a weapon they can point at their enemies. Full acceptance was never really on the table. And now? Cade asked. Now I don't know what I want, Kieran admitted. The bond with Ezereth has changed everything. I can feel his emotions, his thoughts, his magic flowing through me. It's like I'm seeing the world through his eyes, and what I see is different from what I expected. Different how? More complex, more beautiful, less black and white than the pack made it seem. I retreated from my hiding place before I could hear more, my mind reeling with the implications of what I had overheard. The magical bond was affecting Kieran as profoundly as it was affecting me, and Cade's interest in the situation went far beyond his contractual obligations to ensure my success in the games. The second major trial was combat-based, requiring competitors to face each other in direct magical duels. The pairings were determined by lot, and fate seemed determined to test us all when I drew Kieran as my opponent. We would face each other in the arena with the assembled representatives of all three races watching, and one of us would advance to the final trials while the other would be eliminated. The night before our duel, Cade came to my quarters with an expression more serious than I had ever seen him wear. There's something you need to know, he said without preamble. The magical bond between you and Kieran isn't just affecting your abilities. It's creating a resonance that's drawing attention from forces beyond this realm. What kind of forces? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Ancient powers that existed before the current magical order was established, he replied. Entities that have been waiting for centuries for an opportunity to reshape the fundamental laws that govern our reality. The bond you share represents a crack in those laws, a potential gateway for changes that could affect every living being in Istrin. Are you saying that our connection is dangerous to more than just ourselves? I'm saying that there are those who would kill you both to prevent what they see as a threat to stability, and others who would capture you to use your bond as a weapon against their enemies. Either way, the games have become secondary to larger concerns. Then what do you suggest? Win, he said simply. Win the games, claim your freedom, and then we'll figure out how to protect you from the forces that will come looking for you. And Kieran? Cade was quiet for a long moment. That will depend on what he chooses when the moment comes. The bond gives you both power, but it also gives you both responsibility. How you use that responsibility will determine whether you become a force for positive change or a catalyst for destruction. The duel took place at noon, when the aligned moons were visible even in the bright sky and magical energies ran at their highest. Kieran and I faced each other across the arena floor, both of us knowing that this moment would determine not just the outcome of the games, but the course of our future relationship. He looked magnificent in his combat gear, every inch the warrior I had trained with for so many years. But I could see the conflict in his eyes, the war between duty and desire, loyalty and love. The magical bond between us hummed with tension, carrying his emotions to me as clearly as if he were speaking them aloud. I don't want to fight you, he said quietly. His words meant for me alone despite the crowd surrounding us. Then don't, I replied. Choose something else. Choose us. It's not that simple, he said, but I could feel his resolve wavering. The signal to begin our duel rang out across the arena, and both of us raised our hands to channel combat magic. But instead of attacking each other, we found ourselves locked in a strange dance of power where our magic intertwined rather than clashed. The bond between us had grown so strong that we could no longer fight each other without fighting ourselves. The crowd grew restless as minutes passed without either of us landing a decisive blow. Our magic swirled around the arena in patterns that were beautiful rather than destructive, creating light shows that spoke more of harmony than conflict. It was clear to everyone watching that something unprecedented was happening. Finally, one of the game officials called for a halt. "This exhibition is pointless," he declared. "Neither competitor is making a serious attempt to defeat the other. We will reschedule this match after the contestants have been reminded of their obligations." But before we could be separated, Cade stepped into the arena. It was a violation of every rule governing the games, but his demonic authority gave him the right to intervene in situations that threatened the magical stability of the competition. "There will be no rescheduling," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the amphitheater. "What you have witnessed is not a failure of will but a manifestation of power beyond your current understanding. These two competitors have created something new, something that transcends the traditional boundaries of magical combat. Explain yourself, demon," demanded the chief judge, an ancient elf whose authority was respected by all three races. "They have formed a magical node," Cade said, "a connection so deep that they are no longer separate magical entities but two parts of a greater whole. To force them to fight each other would be like asking a person to cut off their own hand. Then they have both forfeited," the judge ruled. "Neither can advance to the final trials." "No," Cade said firmly. "I invoke the right of substitution. As Ezaretha's contracted mentor, I claim the right to take his place in the final trials." The crowd erupted in chaos. The right of substitution was an ancient law that had not been invoked in centuries, and many questioned whether it still applied under current rules. But Cade's claim was technically valid, and after much debate, the judges agreed to allow it. That evening, as the implications of the day's events sank in, I found myself in Cade's quarters trying to understand what had just happened. "Why?" I asked him. "Why would you risk yourself for my freedom?" "Because your debt was contracted through me," he said. "If you fail to fulfill the terms, the penalty falls on both of us. By taking your place, I'm protecting my own interests as much as yours." "That's not the whole truth," I said, using my Omega empathy to sense the emotions behind his words. "There's something else, something personal. He was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire that burned in his fireplace. Finally, he said, I told Kieran about someone I knew long ago, someone who reminded me of him. What I didn't tell him was that I loved that person, and that my failure to help him find his path was the greatest regret of my very long existence. And you see a chance for redemption in helping us? I see a chance to do better, he corrected. To help two people find their way to each other instead of watching them destroy themselves through fear and misplaced loyalty. What about the final trials? Can you actually win them? I don't know, he admitted. But I have advantages that you don't. I'm not bound by the magical node that links you to Kieran, and I have centuries of experience in magical combat. If anyone can navigate the challenges ahead, it's me. And if you lose, then we all lose, he said simply. But at least we'll lose together, fighting for something we believe in rather than surrendering to forces beyond our control. The final trial was scheduled for the night of the full alignment, when all 3 moons would occupy the same point in the sky and magical barriers would be at their weakest. It was traditionally a test of pure magical power, where competitors faced challenges designed to push their abilities to the absolute limit. But this year, something was different. Reports came in from across Istran of magical disturbances, reality shifts, and creatures appearing that had not been seen for millennia. The ancient powers that Cade had warned me about were stirring, drawn by the magical resonance of the bond between Kieran and myself. The final trial will be more dangerous than usual, Cade told us as we prepared for the evening's events. The magical instability caused by your bond has attracted attention from entities that exist outside our normal reality. They will try to use the trial as an opportunity to break through into our world. What can we do? Kieran asked. Since his duel with me had been interrupted, he had been allowed to remain as an observer, though he was no longer technically a competitor. Stay close to each other, Cade advised. The bond between you is both a vulnerability and a strength. Used properly, it could give us the power we need to face whatever comes through the dimensional barriers. Used properly how? I asked. I'm not entirely sure, Cade admitted. Magical nodes are so rare that there's very little recorded information about their practical applications. We'll have to improvise based on what we observe. The final trial began at midnight, with Cade facing 2 other competitors in the center of the arena while magical energies built to dangerous levels around them. The challenge was to maintain a complex spell working while defending against both direct attacks and environmental hazards created by the unstable magical field. First, everything proceeded normally. The 3 competitors wove intricate magical patterns while deflecting each other's attempts at disruption. Cade's centuries of experience served him well, allowing him to adapt to changing conditions with a fluidity that impressed even his opponents. But then the dimensional barriers began to crack. It started as a subtle warping of the air above the arena, like heat shimmer on a summer day. But quickly it became something more pronounced, a visible tear in reality itself through which alien light poured into our world. And through that tear came something that should not have existed in our reality. The entity that emerged was difficult to look at directly, its form shifting constantly between different configurations of impossible geometry. It radiated power that made the strongest mages in the arena feel like children, and its very presence began to warp the fundamental laws of magic around it. Everyone out, Cade shouted, abandoning his spell working to focus on containing the breach. This is beyond what any single competitor can handle, but the other competitors were paralyzed by the entity's alien presence, their minds struggling to process something so fundamentally different from everything they understood about reality. It fell to Cade alone to hold the line against a force that could unmake everything they knew. I watched from the stands as the demon I had come to respect and care for threw everything he had against an enemy that seemed immune to conventional magical attacks. His silver eyes blazed with power as he wove defensive spells that bought precious seconds for the crowd to evacuate, but I could see that he was fighting a losing battle. We have to help him, I told Kieran, grabbing his arm. The bond between us, the power Cade mentioned, this is what it was meant for. I don't know how, Kieran replied, but he didn't resist as I pulled him toward the arena floor. I don't understand what we're supposed to do. Neither do I admitted. But we have to try. We leaped over the barrier separating the stands from the arena floor and ran toward the center where Cade was making his desperate stand. The entity had grown larger since its arrival, feeding on the magical energies that permeated the amphitheater, and its alien thoughts pressed against our minds with weight that threatened to crush our sanity. But as Kieran and I drew closer to each other, something extraordinary began to happen. The magical bond between us, which had been a source of confusion and conflict, suddenly snapped into perfect harmony. Our individual magical signatures merged into something greater than the sum of their parts, creating a resonance that cut through the entity's alien influence like a blade through mist. Now, Cade shouted, recognizing what was happening. Channel everything you have through your connection. Don't hold anything back. I reached for Kieran's hand and felt the full force of our combined magical essence flow through the bond between us. It was overwhelming, like trying to contain an ocean in a teacup, but somehow our connection made it possible to channel power that would have destroyed either of us individually. The energy that erupted from our joined hands was unlike anything any of us had ever seen. It was pure creative force, the power to reshape reality itself according to will and desire. And what we willed, with every fiber of our beings, was for the entity to return to whatever realm it had come from and leave our world in peace. The alien presence fought against our combined assault, its impossible form writhing as it struggled to maintain its foothold in our reality. But the power flowing through our bond was too strong, too focused, too determined to be denied. With a sound like reality itself screaming, the entity was forced back through the dimensional tear, which immediately sealed itself behind it. The sudden silence that followed was deafening. The three of us stood in the center of the arena, breathing hard and trying to process what had just happened. Around us, the amphitheater was a ruin of twisted stone and scorched earth, but we were alive and our world was safe. That was... Kieran began, then stopped, apparently unable to find words for the experience. Unprecedented, Cade finished, his usual composure completely shattered. In all my centuries of existence, I have never seen anything like what you two just accomplished. Does this mean I've won the games? I asked, trying to inject some levity into the situation despite the magnitude of what we had faced. The games are over, Cade said solemnly. What happened here tonight transcends any competition or political maneuvering. You've proven that the bond between you is not just powerful but necessary. The old ways of thinking about racial divisions and hierarchical structures are obsolete in the face of what you represent. What do we represent? Kieran asked. Change, Cade replied. Evolution. The possibility that different races can not only coexist but create something greater through their union than any of them could achieve alone. Over the following days, as news of the events at the Games spread throughout Istrin, I began to understand the full implications of what had occurred. The magical bond between Kieran and myself had not just saved our world from an extra-dimensional threat. It had demonstrated a new model for how different magical beings could relate to each other. Representatives from all three races came to meet with us, some seeking to understand the nature of our connection, others hoping to exploit it for their own purposes. But Cade proved to be an invaluable advisor, helping us navigate the political complexities while protecting us from those who would use our bond as a weapon. Your debt is fulfilled, he told me formally during one of our private meetings. The terms of our contract have been satisfied through your actions in the arena. You are free to make your own choices about your future. And what if I choose to stay? I asked. What if I don't want to be free of all obligations? What are you suggesting? He asked, though I could see in his eyes that he already suspected. I'm suggesting that we formalize what we've already become, I said. Not a debtor-creditor relationship, but a true partnership. The three of us, working together to explore what this new kind of connection makes possible. You want to include me in your bond with Kieran? He asked carefully. I want to build something with both of you, I corrected. Something that goes beyond traditional categories and relationships. Something that reflects who we really are rather than what society expects us to be. Cade was quiet for a long time, considering my proposal. Finally, he said, It would be complicated. A three-way partnership involving beings from different races, with different magical traditions and different lifespans. There would be challenges we can't even anticipate. Most worthwhile things are complicated, I replied, echoing words he had once spoken to me. The question is whether you think it's worth trying. I think, he said slowly, that I have spent too many centuries regretting the chances I didn't take. If you and Kieran are willing to accept a demon as an equal partner in whatever you're building, then yes, I think it's worth trying. That evening, the three of us sat together in Cade's quarters, discussing the practical and emotional implications of the relationship we were contemplating. It was unlike anything any of us had experienced before. A partnership that would blend romantic love, intellectual collaboration, and magical communion in ways that had no precedent in our respective cultures. I never expected this, Kieran admitted as we talked through our hopes and concerns. When I first came to the games, I thought I was choosing between loyalty to my pack and loyalty to my friend. I never imagined I might be choosing to create something entirely new. None of us expected this, I agreed. But maybe that's what makes it worth exploring. We're not bound by anyone else's expectations or definitions. We can create our own terms. What would those terms be? Cade asked, his practical demonic mind already working through the details of what we were proposing. Equality, I said immediately. No hierarchy based on race or magical ability or past relationships. We're all equal partners in whatever we build together. Honesty, Kieran added. No more secrets. No more hidden agendas. If this is going to work, we have to trust each other completely. Freedom, Cade contributed. The right to change, to grow, to evolve as individuals while maintaining our commitment to the partnership. This can't be a cage for any of us. And love, I said, looking at both of them. Not just romantic love, though that's part of it, but the deeper kind of love that comes from truly seeing and accepting each other. The kind that makes us better than we are alone. We spent the night talking through the implications of what we were committing to, exploring the possibilities and challenges that lay ahead. It was both the most practical and the most romantic conversation I had ever been part of, a careful negotiation that was also a declaration of intent. As dawn broke over Istrin, we sealed our agreement with a ritual that blended elements from all three of our magical traditions. We exchanged vows that were both solemn and joyful, promises that acknowledged the complexity of what we were undertaking while affirming our commitment to face that complexity together. The magical bond that had begun as an accident between Kieran and myself expanded to include Cade, creating a three-way connection that was unlike anything recorded in the magical literature of any race. We became something new, something unprecedented, something that would challenge every assumption about how different beings could relate to each other. Our first months together were an adventure in discovery. We learned to navigate the complex emotional and practical challenges of a three-way relationship, developing new forms of communication and intimacy that honored our individual needs while strengthening our collective bond. Cade brought his vast knowledge and experience to our partnership, serving as a bridge between our world and the larger magical community. His demonic contacts proved invaluable as we worked to establish ourselves as a new kind of political entity, one that transcended traditional racial boundaries. Kieran contributed his warrior's instincts and his deep understanding of loyalty and honor. His ability to read emotional states and his fierce protectiveness made him our guardian and our conscience, ensuring that our growing power didn't corrupt our original intentions. I served as the magical anchor for our partnership, using my Omega abilities to channel and focus the combined energies of our three-way bond. My training in political analysis also proved useful as we navigated the complex reactions of the various racial governments to our unprecedented alliance. Together, we established a new kind of household that became a model for others who were interested in exploring relationships that transcended traditional categories. We welcomed visitors from all three races, offering sanctuary to those who didn't fit into conventional structures and serving as proof that alternative ways of living were not only possible but desirable. We've created something important, I observed one evening as we sat together watching the sunset from the balcony of our shared home. Not just for ourselves, but for everyone who has ever felt trapped by the limitations others tried to impose on them. It's just the beginning, Cade replied, his silver eyes reflecting the light of the dying day. What we've accomplished here will inspire others to question their own assumptions about race and relationship and power. We've opened a door that can never be closed again. Are you ready for that kind of responsibility? Kieran asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. I don't think anyone is ever ready for that kind of responsibility, I replied. But I think we're as prepared as anyone could be. We have each other, we have our principles, and we have the power to protect what we've built. Then let's see where this journey takes us, Kate said, reaching for both of our hands. Together, the years that followed were filled with challenges and triumphs as our relationship deepened and evolved. We faced opposition from traditionalists who saw our bond as a threat to established order, but we also found allies among those who recognized the potential for positive change that our partnership represented. We established a school for young people from all three races who showed promise in cross-cultural magic, teaching them not just technique but the philosophical principles that made peaceful coexistence possible. Our students went on to become leaders in their own communities, carrying our message of cooperation and understanding to corners of Istrin that had never imagined such possibilities. We also continued to explore the magical implications of our three-way bond, discovering new applications for the power we could generate together. Our research contributed to advances in healing magic, defensive enchantments, and interdimensional communication that benefited all of Istrin's inhabitants. But perhaps most importantly, we served as living proof that love could transcend any barrier, that connection was stronger than division, and that the future belonged to those willing to embrace change rather than cling to the past. Our story became legend, told around fires and in royal courts, inspiring others to question the limitations they had accepted and to reach for possibilities they had never dared to imagine. We had begun as three individuals bound by circumstance and accident, but we had become something greater, a symbol of hope for all those who believed that the world could be better than it was. And as I looked back on the journey that had brought us together, from my desperate attempt to escape an unwanted fate to our current position as founders of a new way of being, I realized that sometimes the greatest victories came not from defeating enemies but from transforming them into allies, not from maintaining old structures but from building new ones, and not from accepting the limitations others imposed but from discovering the power that lay within ourselves. We had rewritten the rules of love, magic, and society itself. We had proven that an Omega could be strong, that a half-breed could find belonging, and that a demon could choose redemption. Most importantly, we had shown that together we were capable of anything. This was our story. The elf, the wolf, and the demon who chose each other and changed the world. It was a story of transformation and triumph, of love conquering fear, and of the power that emerges when different beings unite around common values rather than divide over superficial differences. And it was only the beginning of what we would accomplish together in the years to come. 5 years after the Great Games, our household had become a pilgrimage destination for those seeking to understand the new possibilities that our bond represented. Scholars came to study the magical mechanics of our three-way connection. Politicians sought to understand the diplomatic implications of cross-racial partnerships, and young people arrived hoping to find acceptance for their own unconventional desires and identities. Our home had expanded from Cade's original quarters to encompass an entire wing of the ancient structure that housed the game's archives. We had libraries filled with texts from all three racial traditions, laboratories where we conducted our magical research, and common rooms where visitors could gather to share their stories and seek advice. But it was in our private chambers that the true depth of our relationship continued to unfold. The physical intimacy we shared had evolved into something that transcended mere passion, becoming a form of magical communion that strengthened our bond with each encounter. When we came together in love, our individual essences merged so completely that it was impossible to tell where one of us ended and the other's began. I never imagined it could be like this, Kieran murmured one evening as we lay entwined in our shared bed, our bodies still humming with the afterglow of lovemaking that had been as much magical working as physical pleasure. The way our energies flow together, the way I can feel both of your hearts beating in rhythm with mine. It's because we've learned to trust completely, Cade replied, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my chest. When there are no barriers between souls, when every wall has been brought down and every secret shared, this is what becomes possible. Sometimes I think we're becoming something beyond individual identity. I added, though the thought didn't frighten me as it once might have. Not losing ourselves, but finding a larger self that encompasses all three of us. Is that what you want? Cade asked, his silver eyes serious despite the intimacy of the moment. To become so integrated that we lose the ability to exist independently? I don't think that's what's happening, I said after considering the question carefully. When we're apart, I'm still fully myself. But when we're together like this, I become more than myself. It's addition, not subtraction. I agree, Kieran said, shifting to look at both of us. I can still function alone, still make independent decisions, still maintain my own identity. But being with you both makes me feel more complete, more capable, more fully realized than I am on my own. Our conversations in these intimate moments were as important as the physical pleasure we shared. It was here, in the safety of our private space, that we continued to negotiate the complex emotional and practical aspects of our unprecedented relationship. We talked through jealousies and insecurities, celebrated individual achievements and shared victories, and planned for a future that none of us could fully envision but all of us were committed to creating. The challenges we faced were unlike anything traditional couples dealt with. How do you balance the needs and desires of three people when making major decisions? How do you handle the inevitable moments when two partners are closer than the third? How do you maintain individual growth while deepening collective bonds? We had developed strategies over the years, but they required constant attention and adjustment. We scheduled regular times for one-on-one interactions between each pairing, ensuring that the intimate dynamics between any two of us didn't get overshadowed by the group dynamic. We established protocols for decision-making that ensured everyone's voice was heard and no one felt excluded or overruled. Most importantly, we had learned to communicate with a level of honesty and vulnerability that most people never achieved even in traditional relationships. We shared our fears, our desires, our frustrations, and our dreams without reservation, trusting that our love was strong enough to handle whatever truths we revealed. I've been thinking about expanding our research, Kate said during one of our evening planning sessions. The magical bond we share has applications beyond what we've explored so far. I think we could develop techniques that would allow others to form similar connections. That's a significant step, I observed. Are we ready to share something so personal and powerful with the wider world? The question is whether we have the right to keep it to ourselves, Kieran replied. If what we've discovered could help others find the kind of happiness and connection we've found, don't we have an obligation to share it? There are risks, Kate acknowledged. Not everyone who attempts to form magical bonds will be compatible. Some might be seriously hurt in the process, and there's always the possibility that the techniques could be misused by those seeking power rather than genuine connection. Then we need to be careful about how we approach this, I said. Start small with people we trust, and develop safeguards as we learn more about the process. I may have candidates in mind, Kieran said thoughtfully. I've been corresponding with a young demon-wolf hybrid who's been struggling to find acceptance in either community, and there's an elven scholar who's been researching cross-racial magical compatibility. They might be willing to participate in careful, supervised experiments. What about the political implications? I asked. If we start helping others form cross-racial bonds, the traditional governments will see it as a direct threat to their authority. They already see us as a threat, Cade pointed out. The question is whether we're going to let their fears limit what we can accomplish, or whether we're going to continue pushing forward despite their opposition. I vote for pushing forward, Kieran said firmly. We didn't come this far to hide our light under a bushel. If we can help others find what we've found, we have to try. Our decision to expand our research and begin helping others form magical bonds marked the beginning of a new phase in our relationship and our mission. We established formal protocols for evaluating potential candidates, developed magical safeguards to protect participants from harm, and began documenting our techniques for future researchers. The first successful cross-racial bonding we facilitated was between Lyran, the demon-wolf hybrid Kieran had mentioned, and Theron, an elven scholar who had been studying our case for months. Both were young, both were outcasts in their own communities, and both had developed a deep friendship during Theron's research visits to our home. The bonding process was intense and emotionally demanding for everyone involved. We served as guides and protectors, using our own bond to stabilize the magical energies as Lyran and Theron opened themselves to each other completely. It required hours of careful preparation and meditation, followed by a magical working that left all of us drained but exhilarated. "It's extraordinary," Theron whispered as he and Lyran held each other in the aftermath of their successful bonding. "I can feel him inside my mind, inside my soul. It's like suddenly having access to parts of myself I never knew existed." "The integration will take time," Cade warned them gently. "The first few days can be overwhelming as your magical signatures adjust to each other. Stay close, be patient with yourselves, and don't try to push the process faster than it wants to go." "How long before we'll know if it's truly stable?" Lyran asked, his voice still shaky from the intensity of what they had just experienced. "For us, it took about a week for the initial integration to settle, and several months before we felt truly comfortable with the connection," I replied. "But every bond is different. Yours might stabilize faster or take longer, depending on your individual magical characteristics. The important thing is that you have each other now," Kieran added. "Whatever challenges you face in integrating your bond, you'll face them together." Watching Lyran and Theron navigate their new connection brought back memories of our own early days, when the magical bond between Kieran and myself had been more burden than blessing. But it also highlighted how far we had come, not just in understanding the mechanics of magical bonding, but in developing the emotional maturity needed to support such deep connections. Over the following months, as Lyran and Theron's bond stabilized and strengthened, we continued our research with other candidates. Not every attempt was successful. We learned that magical compatibility required more than just mutual attraction or intellectual connection. There had to be a fundamental resonance between the participants' magical signatures, a harmony that couldn't be forced or artificially created. But when the conditions were right, the results were transformative. We facilitated bonds between a human mage and a dragon shapeshifter, between two elven outcasts whose magical abilities had made them pariahs in their own communities, and between a trio of young demons who had been struggling to find their place in the rigid hierarchy of their realm. Each successful bonding added to our understanding of the process and our confidence in the techniques we were developing. We began to see patterns in the types of people who were drawn to magical bonding, common characteristics that seemed to predict compatibility and success. "They're all outsiders in some way," I observed during one of our research sessions. "People who don't fit neatly into the categories their societies have created for them." "That makes sense," Cade replied. "Those who are comfortable with conventional structures have less motivation to seek alternatives. It's the misfits and rebels who are willing to take the risks involved in forming magical bonds." "Which means we're not just creating individual connections," Kieran added. "We're building a community of people who share certain values and perspectives. A network of individuals who have chosen connection over conformity." "That could be powerful," I said thoughtfully. "If enough people form these bonds, if our network grows large enough, we could represent a real alternative to the traditional power structures." "Or a real threat to them," Cade warned. "The established governments are already nervous about our influence. If they begin to see us as the center of a growing movement rather than an isolated anomaly, their response could be much more aggressive." His concerns proved prophetic. As our network of bonded individuals grew, we began to receive reports of increased surveillance from agents of all three racial governments. Some of our visitors were questioned after leaving our home, and several of our correspondents reported pressure from authorities to cease their communications with us. The situation came to a head when a delegation arrived unannounced at our home, consisting of high-ranking officials from the Elven Council, the Werewolf Pack hierarchies, and the demonic courts. They demanded an immediate audience, and their manner made it clear that this was not a request. "We have come to discuss the concerning activities taking place at this location," announced Elder Veilthorn, the lead elven representative. "Reports indicate that you are conducting magical experiments that pose a threat to the stability of interracial relations. We are facilitating connections between individuals who seek deeper relationships," I replied carefully. Our work is entirely voluntary and causes no harm to anyone. You are disrupting the natural order, declared Alpha Grimwick, the werewolf representative. The boundaries between races exist for good reasons. Your bonds create confusion and instability that undermines the foundations of our societies. The foundations of your societies are built on artificial divisions and imposed hierarchies. Kieran shot back, his warrior's instincts responding to the aggressive tone. What we're creating is based on choice and mutual respect. What you're creating is chaos, countered Baroness Myrith, the demonic delegate. These unnatural bonds you promote weaken the magical disciplines that maintain order in our realm. Your influence must be contained. Contained how? Cade asked, his voice dangerously quiet. You will cease your research into magical bonding, Elder Valethorn declared. You will discontinue contact with individuals from outside your household, and you will submit to regular monitoring to ensure compliance with these restrictions. And if we refuse? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Then you will be declared enemies of the state by all three governments, Alpha Grimwick replied. Your movements will be restricted, your resources seized, and your continued existence will depend on your willingness to cooperate. The three of us exchanged glances, communicating through our bond in ways the delegates couldn't perceive. We had known this moment might come, had prepared for the possibility that our work would eventually threaten those in power enough to provoke a direct confrontation. We need time to consider your proposal, Cade said diplomatically. This is not a decision we can make lightly. You have 3 days, Baroness Myrith announced. After that, we will assume that your silence indicates refusal to comply, and we will act accordingly. After the delegation left, we gathered in our private chambers to discuss our options. The choice before us was stark. Abandon everything we had built and submit to government control, or defy the authorities and face the consequences of open rebellion. They're afraid, Kieran observed. That's why they're moving so aggressively. They can see that what we represent is gaining traction, and they want to stop it before it becomes too powerful to contain. The question is whether we're ready for that kind of confrontation, I said. We have allies, but do we have enough to stand against the combined might of 3 governments? We have something they don't, Cade replied. We have people who are fighting for something they believe in rather than just maintaining power they inherited. That's always been a significant advantage in conflicts like this. Are we really prepared to go to war over this? I asked. The costs could be enormous, not just for us but for everyone in our network. The costs of surrender would be higher, Kieran said firmly. If we back down now, we're not just abandoning our own principles. We're condemning everyone who has found happiness through magical bonding to return to lives of isolation and conformity. He's right, Cade agreed. We've opened a door that can't be closed again. People have seen what's possible, have experienced the kind of connection we offer. They won't go back willingly, and forcing them back will cause more suffering than fighting to protect their freedom. Then we fight, I said, feeling a familiar sense of determination settling over me. But we fight smart. We use every advantage we have, and we make sure we're protecting not just ourselves but everyone who depends on us. The 3 days passed quickly as we prepared for what was to come. We sent messages to our allies throughout the network, warning them of the impending crackdown and helping them develop plans for maintaining contact despite government interference. We strengthened the magical defenses around our home and established contingency plans for continuing our work even if we were forced into hiding. Most importantly, we used our time to reinforce the bonds between ourselves and our closest allies, creating a core group of individuals who could carry on our mission even if we were captured or killed. When the delegation returned on the 4th day, we were ready for them. Have you reached a decision? Elder Valethorn demanded. We have, I replied, standing between Kieran and Cade with our hands linked in a gesture of unity. We decline your offer to surrender our freedom and the freedom of those we protect. Then you have chosen the path of rebellion, Alpha Grimwick snarled. So be it. What followed was the beginning of a conflict that would reshape the political landscape of Istran. Our network of bonded individuals proved to be more extensive and better organized than the governments had realized, and our ability to coordinate through magical connections gave us advantages that conventional military forces couldn't match. The war was not fought with armies and weapons, but with ideas and examples. We demonstrated through our actions that cooperation was stronger than domination, that chosen families were more resilient than inherited hierarchies, and that love was more powerful than fear. It took 2 years of struggle, but eventually the old order began to crack under the pressure of our example. Individuals within the traditional power structures began to question whether the systems they served were truly worth preserving, and defections from government ranks swelled our numbers. The final victory came not through conquest but through transformation. The 3 governments, faced with the choice between adapting to the new reality or being swept aside by it, chose to negotiate. The resulting accords established new legal frameworks that recognized magical bonding as a legitimate form of relationship, protected the rights of cross-racial partnerships, and created mechanisms for peaceful coexistence between traditional and progressive communities. As I stood with Kieran and Cade on the balcony of our home, watching the sunset on the day the accords were signed, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. We had begun as 3 individuals bound by accident and circumstance, but we had become the foundation of a movement that changed the world. "Do you think this is really the end?" Kieran asked, his arm around my waist. "Or just the beginning of something even larger?" "Both," Cade replied, pulling us closer against his side. "The old world is ending, but the new one we're building will take generations to fully realize. Our children and their children will inherit the possibilities we've created. Then we'd better make sure we're worthy of their inheritance," I said, feeling the weight of responsibility and the lightness of hope in equal measure. Our story had become legend, but it was far from over. We had proven that love could transcend any boundary, that connection was stronger than division, and that the future belonged to those willing to choose each other despite the obstacles placed in their path. And as the stars began to shine in the darkening sky above Istrin, I knew that our greatest adventures still lay ahead. 10 years after the signing of the Istrin Accords, our world had transformed in ways that even we had not anticipated. The network of magically bonded individuals had grown from a handful of experimental partnerships to a thriving community that spanned all 3 realms and included members from races that had barely interacted before the changes began. Our home had evolved from a refuge for outcasts to the heart of a new kind of civilization. The ancient structure that had once housed only the game's archives now sprawled across several interconnected buildings, each designed to accommodate the unique needs of our diverse population. We had libraries that contained texts in dozens of languages, workshops where craftsmen from different traditions shared techniques and created hybrid art forms, and meeting halls where representatives from various communities gathered to discuss common concerns. But it was in the private quarters that Kieran, Cade, and I shared that the most profound changes had taken place. Our relationship had deepened beyond anything I had thought possible, evolving from the desperate attraction born of magical accident to a love so profound that it seemed to reshape reality around us. The physical aspects of our bond had become something transcendent. When we came together in passion, our individual consciousnesses merged so completely that we experienced pleasure not just in our own bodies but through each other's sensations. Every touch was multiplied threefold, every kiss shared between all 3 mouths simultaneously, every moment of climax a symphony of sensation that left us breathless and transformed. "I dreamed of you again last night," Kieran whispered one morning as we lay tangled together in our bed, dawn light filtering through the crystal windows of our chamber. "But it wasn't just you, Ezereth. It was both of you, and we were somewhere I'd never seen before, a place where the 3 moons hung in the sky at the same time." "I had the same dream," Cade said softly, his silver eyes reflecting an inner light that had grown brighter over the years. "We were standing in a garden where flowers bloomed with their own illumination, and there were children playing around us. Children who looked like they belonged to all 3 of us somehow. The prophetic dreams have been coming more frequently," I observed, tracing patterns on Cade's chest with my fingertips. "I think our bond is evolving again, reaching into possibilities we haven't explored yet." "What kind of possibilities?" Kieran asked, shifting to look at both of us with eyes that held equal measures of curiosity and concern. "Reproductive possibilities," Cade said quietly. "The dreams, The way our magical signatures have been shifting. The strange new resonances I've been detecting in our shared essence. I think our bond has reached a point where we might be able to create life together. The implications of what he was suggesting took my breath away. Cross-racial reproduction was theoretically possible but practically unheard of, requiring magical techniques so complex and dangerous that few had ever attempted them. But a three-way magical working that could result in a child who carried the essence of all three parents, that was beyond unprecedented. Is that even possible? I asked, though my heart was already racing with the possibility. A year ago, I would have said no, Cade replied. But our bond has been defying conventional wisdom since it began. The magical resonance between us has created something entirely new, something that might be capable of supporting life in ways that normal relationships cannot. What would be involved? Kieran asked, his practical warrior's mind already thinking through the logistics. Extensive preparation, Cade said. Months of magical conditioning to align our essences even more closely than they already are. Ritual workings that would push our bond to its absolute limits. And risks, significant risks to all three of us if anything went wrong during the process. What kind of risks? I pressed. The magical feedback from a failed reproductive working could destroy our bond entirely, he admitted. We could lose not just the possibility of creating life together, but everything we've built over the past decade. We could even lose each other completely. The thought was terrifying, but as I looked at the two men who had become the center of my universe, I realized that the possibility of creating new life with them was worth almost any risk. I want to try, I said quietly. Not immediately, not without extensive preparation and safeguards, but yes, I want to explore this possibility with both of you. So do I, Kieran said, reaching for my hand. The dreams have felt so real, so right, like they're showing us something we're meant to do. Then we begin research, Cade decided. Carefully, methodically, with every possible precaution. This isn't something we can approach casually. Over the following months, we threw ourselves into studying every text we could find on magical reproduction, consulting with experts from all three races, and conducting preliminary experiments to test the feasibility of what we were considering. The process was both intellectually fascinating and emotionally intense, bringing us closer together as we explored the deepest mysteries of life and creation. We discovered that successful magical reproduction required not just compatibility between the participants, but a level of emotional and spiritual unity that went beyond normal bonding. The parents had to be so perfectly aligned that their individual identities could merge temporarily into a single creative force, a process that was both beautiful and terrifying to contemplate. The ancient texts speak of reproductive workings as acts of divine creation, Cade explained during one of our research sessions. The participants become vessels for forces beyond their individual capabilities, channeling the fundamental powers that govern life itself. That sounds simultaneously wonderful and dangerous, I observed. All creation involves risk, Kieran replied, but the potential rewards. He gestured to the sketches and diagrams we had been making, trying to visualize what our combined essence might produce. A child who embodies the best qualities of all three races, who could serve as a bridge between our peoples in ways we never could. Or children, Cade corrected. The magical resonance patterns suggest that a three-way working would likely produce multiple offspring, possibly as many as 5 or 6. The idea of suddenly becoming parents to half a dozen children was overwhelming, but as we discussed the practicalities of raising a large family, I found myself growing excited about the possibilities. Our home was already a gathering place for young people seeking guidance and acceptance. Expanding that role to include our own children felt like a natural evolution. We'll need help, I said practically. Raising multiple children while maintaining our other responsibilities will require a support network. We have that, Kieran pointed out. The bonded pairs we've helped over the years, the extended community we've built, they're already like family. I think many of them would be honored to help raise the first children born from a three-way magical working. The political implications are significant too, Cade added. Children born from our union would be living proof that the boundaries between races are artificial constructs. They could represent the future of Istran in ways that would make them both celebrated and targeted. Then we'll protect them, I said firmly. Whatever challenges they face because of their unique heritage, they'll face them with the full support of our community behind them. The actual reproductive working took place during the spring equinox, when magical energies were at their most fertile and the barriers between possibility and reality were at their thinnest. We had spent 6 months in preparation, aligning our magical signatures so perfectly that sometimes it was difficult to tell where one of us ended and the others began. The ritual itself was the most intense magical experience of my life. As we joined our bodies and souls in the sacred circle we had prepared, I felt our individual identities dissolving into something larger and more powerful than any of us alone. We became a single creative force, a conduit for the fundamental powers that govern birth and growth and transformation. The moment of conception was unmistakable, a surge of light and energy that seemed to illuminate the entire chamber, followed by a sense of completeness and purpose that left all 3 of us weeping with joy. We had done it. We had created new life together in a way that defied every conventional understanding of reproduction and family. The months that followed were filled with wonder and discovery as we learned to navigate the unique challenges of a magical pregnancy. Unlike normal gestations, this one involved all 3 of us equally. We all experienced the symptoms, all felt the children growing within our shared essence, all participated in the daily miracle of developing life. I can feel them, Kieran said one evening as we sat together in our garden, his hands resting on my belly where the physical signs of pregnancy were just beginning to show. 4 distinct presences, each one different but all unmistakably ours. 4, Cade confirmed, his own hands joining Kieran's. 2 who favor the elven essence, one who carries more demonic characteristics, and one who seems to be predominantly wolf in nature, though all of them show influences from all 3 of us. They're going to be extraordinary, I said, feeling tears of happiness streaming down my face. I can sense their potential already, the way they're absorbing power from our bond, the strength they're developing. They'll need that strength, Cade said soberly. The world they're being born into is changing rapidly, and they'll face challenges we can't fully anticipate. He was right. Even as we celebrated the approaching birth of our children, reports were coming in from across Istrin of new tensions and conflicts. The success of our movement had inspired imitators, but not all of them shared our commitment to peaceful change and voluntary bonding. Some groups had begun using magical bonding techniques as weapons, forcing unwilling participants into connections that served the bondholders' agenda rather than creating genuine partnerships. We're going to have to address this, I said during one of our evening discussions. If people start associating magical bonding with coercion and abuse, it could undermine everything we've worked to build. I've been thinking about that, Kieran replied. What if we established formal training programs, certification processes that would ensure anyone teaching bonding techniques understands both the practical methods and the ethical principles behind them? A guild system, Cade mused, with standards for membership and consequences for those who violate the principles we've established. It could work, but it would require significant resources and organizational effort. We have both, I pointed out. Our network is large enough and well-established enough to support that kind of institutional development. And with the children coming, we'll need to ensure that the world they inherit is one that values what they represent. The birth of our children was a magical event that drew witnesses from across Istrin. Representatives from all 3 races came to observe the emergence of the first offspring born from a cross-racial 3-way bonding, curious to see what such an unprecedented union would produce. They were not disappointed. Our children were born during a ceremony that combined elements from elven, werewolf, and demonic traditions, emerging into the world already glowing with their own inner light. Each one was perfect in their own way, carrying visible characteristics from all 3 of their parents while possessing unique qualities that were entirely their own. Lyrian, the eldest by mere minutes, had Kieran's dark hair and strong build, but his eyes were the silver of Cade's and his features carried the elegant bones of my elven heritage. Thane was smaller and more delicate, with my pointed ears and pale coloring, but his movements carried the predatory grace of a born wolf and his smile held hints of demonic mischief. Sarah combined Cade's otherworldly beauty with Kieran's fierce intensity, her hair shifting between colors like living flame and her laugh carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate directly with the soul. And little Kale, the youngest, appeared almost human at first glance until he opened eyes that held depths like starlight and smiled with wisdom far beyond his minutes of existence. "They're magnificent," whispered Dr. Elena Brightwater, the elven healer who had assisted with the birth. "I've never seen anything like them. They're not just children. They're embodiments of possibility itself." "They're our legacy," I said, cradling Thane while Kieran held Lyrian and Cade supported Sarah and Kale. "Proof that love can create beauty beyond anything the old divisions allowed." "They're also going to be powerful," Cade observed, his voice filled with equal parts pride and concern. "I can already sense magical potential in them that exceeds anything I've encountered in a millennium of existence. They'll need careful guidance to learn to control their abilities." "They'll have it," Kieran said firmly. "Not just from us, but from our entire community. These children belong to all of us, and all of us will help raise them." The first few years of parenthood were a whirlwind of discovery and adjustment. Our children grew at an accelerated rate, their magical development far outpacing their physical maturation. By the age of 2, they were already demonstrating abilities that would have been remarkable in adult mages, and their emotional intelligence was extraordinary. "Mama Ezereth is sad," 3-year-old Sarah announced one morning, as I struggled with correspondence from a community that had experienced problems with forced bonding. "The letters make his heart hurt. Can you help him feel better?" Kieran asked, always encouraging our children to use their empathic abilities constructively. "We all can," Lyrian said seriously, and suddenly I felt 4 small minds touching mine with love and comfort, their combined emotional support washing away my distress like warm sunshine dispelling clouds. "Thank you, my darlings," I said, gathering all 4 of them into my arms. "You always know exactly what I need." "That's what family does," Kale said with the matter-of-fact wisdom that all our children seemed to possess. "We take care of each other." It was true. Our children had grown up surrounded by love and acceptance, not just from their 3 parents but from the extended community of bonded individuals who had become their honorary aunts and uncles. They understood instinctively that families could take many forms, that love was not limited by blood or species, and that their unique heritage was something to be celebrated rather than hidden. But as they grew older, we began to realize that their powers were developing in ways that went beyond what any of us had anticipated. They could communicate telepathically not just with each other but with other magical beings across vast distances. They could manipulate magical energies with a precision and subtlety that impressed even Cade. Most remarkably, they seemed to be able to facilitate bonding between others simply by being present during the process. "They're natural healers," observed Master Cornelius, a demon scholar who had come to study our children's development. "But not healers of physical ailments, healers of emotional and spiritual disconnection. Their very presence seems to make it easier for others to form deep connections." "Is that safe?" I asked, my parental instincts alert to any potential danger to my children. "I believe so," he replied. "They're not forcing connections or manipulating others' emotions. They're simply smoothing the path, removing barriers that might otherwise interfere with natural bonding processes. Like magical facilitators," Cade mused. "They make possible what was already potential, rather than creating something that wouldn't exist otherwise." "Exactly," Master Cornelius confirmed. "It's a remarkable gift, and one that could be incredibly valuable as they mature." As our children entered their teenage years, their abilities continued to develop in unexpected directions. They began having prophetic dreams that were far more detailed and accurate than anything I had experienced, visions of possible futures that helped guide important decisions for our community. "There's going to be a crisis in the eastern reaches," 15-year-old Lyrian announced during one of our family meetings. "A group of traditionalist elves are planning to attack one of the bonded communities there. They think they can use violence to force a return to the old ways." "When?" Kieran asked, immediately shifting into his protective mode. "Within the next moon cycle," Thane replied, his eyes distant with the remnants of shared vision. "But we can prevent it if we act quickly." "How?" I asked.
Diplomatique intervention, sera Ced confident.
The leader of the traditionalist group has a son who's been questioning the old ways. If we can reach him, show him what we've built here, he might be able to influence his father's decisions. And if diplomacy fails? Cade asked practically. Then we defend our family? Cale said simply. And for a moment his young face carried an expression of such fierce determination that I was reminded he was the child of 3 warriors, regardless of his gentle nature. The crisis in the eastern reaches became a turning point in our children's development and our community's evolution. We traveled there as a family, bringing with us several of the most experienced bonded pairs to serve as both examples and support. Our children's natural ability to facilitate connections proved invaluable in bridging the gap between the traditionalists and the progressives. I don't understand how this is possible, said Lord Silvermoon, the traditionalist leader, as he watched his own son form a spontaneous bond with a young werewolf during one of our demonstration sessions. Eden has never shown any interest in cross-racial relationships before, because he never felt safe exploring that interest. Thane replied with the gentle wisdom that made him such an effective mediator. Fear creates walls, Lord Silvermoon. We help people tear down those walls so they can see what was always there. But the consequences, the disruption to our social order. What social order? Sarah asked pointedly. The one that forced your son to hide his true nature? The one that would have condemned him to a lifetime of loneliness rather than allow him to find happiness with someone from a different race? The old ways preserved stability, Lord Silvermoon insisted, though his conviction was clearly wavering as he watched his son's obvious joy. The old ways preserved fear, Lyrian corrected. And fear is not a foundation for lasting stability. Love is, connection is, understanding is. We're not asking you to abandon everything you believe, Cale added. We're asking you to expand it, to make room for new possibilities while keeping what was truly valuable from the past. By the end of our visit, Lord Silvermoon's entire group had been transformed. Several members had formed bonds with individuals from other races. Others had committed to studying our methods with open minds, and the planned attack had been abandoned in favor of establishing formal diplomatic relations with our community. You did something remarkable here, I told our children as we prepared to return home. You didn't just prevent a conflict, you created understanding where there was once only hatred. That's our gift, Sarah said simply. Not just to facilitate bonding between individuals, but to help entire communities learn to see beyond their differences. And our responsibility, Lyrian added seriously. Power like ours comes with obligations. We have to use it wisely, for the benefit of everyone, not just ourselves. Speaking of which, Thane said with the hint of a smile, we've been having more dreams, about the future, about changes coming that will affect all of Istran. What kind of changes? Cade asked, his expression growing serious. New races arriving from beyond our realm, Cale replied. Beings we've never encountered before, seeking refuge from some great catastrophe in their home dimension. They'll need help adapting to our world, and they'll have gifts and knowledge that could benefit everyone if they're welcomed properly. And if they're not welcomed? Kieran asked. Then fear and misunderstanding could lead to conflicts that would make the old racial tensions seem simple by comparison, Lyrian said grimly. The stakes are getting higher, and our role as mediators and facilitators is going to become more important than ever. Then we'd better prepare, I said, feeling the familiar mixture of excitement and apprehension that came with facing new challenges. All of us together. As we traveled back to our home, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought us to this point. What had begun as a desperate attempt to escape an unwanted marriage had evolved into a love story that changed the world, and now our children were poised to carry that transformation into realms we had never imagined. Our family had grown beyond anything I had ever dreamed possible. Not just the 4 miraculous children who carried the essence of all 3 of their parents, but the extended network of bonded individuals who had become our chosen siblings, our adopted relatives, our spiritual family. We had created something unprecedented. A new form of kinship based on shared values rather than shared blood. What are you thinking about? Kieran asked, noticing my contemplative mood as our transport carried us through the familiar landscapes approaching home. Everything, I replied. How far we've come. How much we've accomplished. How much more there is still to do. Any regrets? Cade asked, his silver eyes reflecting the setting sun. Only one, I said, surprising them both. That it took a crisis to bring us together. I sometimes wonder what might have happened if we'd found each other under different circumstances. We might not have been ready for each other, Lyrian observed from where he sat with his siblings. Sometimes people need to be tested by adversity before they can appreciate what they have. Besides, Sarah added with a grin, where's the romance in an easy love story? Obstacles make the happy ending more meaningful. Listen to them, Thane laughed. For teenagers giving relationship advice to their parents. Very wise teenagers, Cale pointed out. Don't forget we have access to prophetic dreams and inherited wisdom from 3 different magical traditions. Not to mention the benefit of growing up in the most unconventional family in Istrin. I added, reaching out to ruffle his hair affectionately. As our home came into view, rising from the landscape like a beacon of hope and possibility, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought us to this moment. We had faced opposition, overcome obstacles, and created something beautiful from the ashes of the old world's limitations. Our love story had become a legend, but more than that, it had become a blueprint for others to follow. We had proven that connection was stronger than division, that chosen family was as valid as blood relations, and that the future belonged to those willing to embrace change rather than cling to the past. And now, with our children growing into their own power and new challenges approaching from beyond our realm, I knew that our greatest adventures were still ahead of us. We would face them as we had faced everything else. Together, united by bonds that transcended species and convention, strengthened by love that had proven capable of transforming the world. This was our legacy. The elf, the wolf, the demon, and the children who embodied the best of all 3 races. We had rewritten the rules of love, family, and society itself, and in doing so, we had opened doorways to possibilities that previous generations could never have imagined. The future was uncertain, but it was also bright with promise. And whatever came next, we would meet it hand in hand, heart to heart, soul to soul, as we always had and always would.